everybody, this is me Adishri with yet another episode of Myth Taken. So in the last episode, we saw how the Ramayana came into existence. It was written by sage Valmiki, he having been given the vision by sage Narada and having written it down on the instructions of Lord Brahma. The Ramayana has 6 kandas, that is Balakandam, Ayodhya Kandam, Aranya Kandam, Kishkinda Kandam, Sundara Kandam and Yuddha Kandam. Today, we'll talk about the Balakandam. It all begins with Ayodhya, the capital city of Kosala, which was north to the bank of Ganga and having been made fertile by the river Sarayu. The kingdom of Kosala and Ayodhya were a prosperous lot. It was at par with any modern city. The king of Ayodhya was Dashratha. He was equal in power to Indra and equal in wealth to Kubera. His name was known throughout all 3 worlds. His people were rich and prosperous and happy. He had 3 wives, Kausalya, Kaikeyi and Sumitra. The king and his people had all that they wanted, but the king had one secret worry. He had no children. After having grieved about this for a long time, he consulted his Kula Guru, Vasishtha, who advised him to conduct a Putra Kameshti Yaga. On the advice of his Kula Guru, he sought out sage Rishishringa to conduct the Yaga. As the Yaga was proceeding, in the Devaloka, a conference was being held by the Devas. The topic was the demon king Ravana. Ravana had acquired a boon from Brahma, which said that he could not be killed by any beast, god or Gandharva. This in a way made him invincible as no one could stand up to him. Thus, he paved his way for destruction, unrighteousness and injustice. He made the Devas and Indra cower with fright. He terrorized all 3 worlds. The Devas were soon getting terrified of him and turned to Lord Brahma, who told them to consult Lord Vishnu about it. When the Devas told Lord Vishnu about their crisis, he told them that he would incarnate on the earth and bring an end to Ravana's atrocities. Now let's go back to Dashratha and his Yaga. As the Yaga was taking place, suddenly from the Yaga fire rose a divine being. When Dashratha approached him, the divine being handed him a bowl of payasam. He told Dashratha, "If you give this to your wives, they will soon give birth to children." Obeying the orders, Dashratha divided the payasam and gave one half to Kausalya and the other half to Kaikeyi. Both the queens, having drunk their fill, gave halves of each of their payasam to Queen Sumitra. Thus, Queen Sumitra had the payasam 2 times. In due course, all 3 queens gave birth to children. Queen Kausalya had Rama, Queen Kaikeyi had Bharata, and Queen Sumitra had Lakshmana and Shatrughna. She had had twins because she drank the payasam 2 times. All 4 of Dashratha's sons were brave, virtuous, kind, and had all the qualities that a prince needed. He was happy to see his children growing up. One day, as King Dashratha was sitting in his court and discussing matters with his courtiers, sage Vishwamitra approached him. Sage Vishwamitra was held in much awe by all because he was once a king who had attained monkhood after having undergone severe hardships. So when the sage entered his court, King Dashratha bent down and touched his feet. He told Vishwamitra respectfully that he was graced by his presence and what he wanted in his humble court. Vishwamitra was pleased by the way in which the king had received him. Sage Vishwamitra replied that he desired his 2 sons Rama and Lakshmana come along with him to the forest to his ashram to defend it from the demons who were wreaking havoc on his yaga. At first, King Dashratha was frightened and tried to back down from his promise. He gave many excuses. He said that his army could go or he himself could go. Hearing all of this, Vishwamitra became angry. He taunted the king that he was breaking his promise, that it was not becoming of his lineage. On hearing all of this, Vasishtha said to Dashratha, "Your children will be safe with Vishwamitra. He can take good care of them and protect them well. This is only for their training." Hearing this from Vasishtha, Dashratha became reassured. He gave permission for his sons to go along with sage Vishwamitra. And so, the 2 princes, with bows and arrows in their hand, following the sage Vishwamitra, headed out of the kingdom of Ayodhya into the forest. The two princes and sage Vishwamitra spent the first night on the banks of river Sarayu. Here, on the banks of river Sarayu, sage Vishwamitra taught Rama and Lakshmana the two secret mantras, Bala and Atibala, which would help them overcome hunger and thirst. The next day, they got up and made their way. Soon, they reached Kamashrama in Angadesha. Vishwamitra explained the history of the place to Rama and Lakshmana. He said, "This is the place where Lord Manmatha cast his arrow on Lord Shiva, and Lord Shiva in anger opened his eyes and burned down the god to ashes." They stayed there for the night, and the next day they again started their journey. After having crossed the river Ganga, they entered a forest where they could hear the dreadful roars of wild beasts. It was a dense and dark forest. Rama turned to Vishwamitra and asked him why this forest was different. Sage Vishwamitra replied, "This is the Dandaka forest. Years ago, it was a beautiful forest. It was a place where the Devas washed Lord Indra, he having committed the sin of killing Vritra. The waters that cleansed Indra cleansed the forest too. It became a beautiful place with beautiful beasts wandering about, people happy and content. Then, a few years ago, the demoness Thataka and her son Marichan took over the place. They were angry at the death of Sunda, Marichan's father and Thataka's husband. He had been killed by the curse of a sage, and Thataka sought revenge. She created absolute havoc here and drove all the people out, and the forest turned so dense and dark that only wild beasts could survive. Having heard this, Rama asked the sage, "You say that Sunda was a yaksha. I have never heard of yakshas being violent. They are gentle people." Then sage Vishwamitra replied, "You have asked an important question. Yes, yakshas are gentle people. But Thataka is cursed. Her father Suketu had prayed to Lord Brahma that he be given a handsome, strong boy child. Lord Brahma had appeared and said that he would get instead a beautiful and strong daughter. That daughter was Thataka. She was both beautiful and strong. She married the Yaksha Sunda and had Maricha. Sunda, by some fault, incurred the wrath of sage Agastya. He got cursed and got killed. Seeing this, both Thataka and Maricha pounced on sage Agastya. Very much angry by their behavior, he caused them to become demons. And so, she terrorizes this forest with her strength." As he was saying this, a dreadful roar came from the forest. Sage Vishwamitra said, "That is Thataka. She knows there are intruders in her forest. You must kill her," he told Rama. Rama replied that his father had sent him to help the sage. He would do anything within his power to help him. Vishwamitra was happy and stood aside. Rama took out his bow and twanged the string. Hearing the sound, Thataka was shocked. Who had dared enter her forest and who was challenging her? She came barreling towards the prince and his brother. The princess began showering arrows on Thataka, and soon she began losing her strength. At last, Rama shot a deadly, powerful arrow on her chest, and she fell to the ground and died. Seeing Thataka fall down, the Devas cheered, and Vishwamitra, overjoyed, embraced the two princes. Having been freed of the curse of Thataka, the forest became beautiful again. The princes spent the night there with Vishwamitra, and the next day, they began their journey to go to Vishwamitra's ashrama. So with this, we come to the end of today's episode. The rest of the story, I'll tell you in the next episode. Thank you and have a nice day.